And leaked documents have revealed the European Union is going to demand from Keir Starmer a surrender of UK fishing rights, all part of a post-Brexit trade deal.
They're also looking at freedom of movement amongst, students, essentially, which anyone under 30, actually, is on the proposal, with Brexiteers and perhaps even those who didn't vote for Brexit, fearing that it betrays the results of the 2016 referendum.
And all of this coming, of course, as the Prime Minister has been desperately attempting to, what he calls, reset relations with the EU.
Let's talk to political strategist Peter Barnes, who's here. They're not going back on the referendum on Brexit. We've been told that explicitly. But are they circumnavigating it?
Well, let's be honest, democracy is about to be sold out by a man with a slick haircut and a donated suit. This is not a reset, this is realignment. You know, it's something that many of us argue that Keir Starmer was going to push for this very heavily as soon as he got into office. And whilst many of us expected a little bit of smaller, more technical changes, there is a lot on the table all at once. And the question we really have to ask is, why are we even at this table in the first place? So you've got university students, fisheries, animal health and illegal immigration. Now, these issues may seem to be to do with trade, but I actually think there's something more at play here. I think this is political. If we actually look where a lot of this has come from, it's not come from the Commission. It's come from the Council of Europe. It's come from European leaders. And what we're really seeing is the European Union leaders panicking about not what's happening in Europe. It's about what's happening over the other side of the Atlantic, and that's Donald Trump. The European Union's actual economic situation isn't great. And with the impending probably trade wars and tariffs coming from the United States, you know, a lot of this stuff is starting to kind of scare a lot of European leaders. And yeah, this is kind of where we are now, that they want to kind of bring the UK back to heel. And this is not, it won't be a negotiation because it's Keir Starmer. He's just got to roll over and sign, have his belly tickled and say, where do I sign? You know, this is a real betrayal, in my opinion.
And that's what a lot of people will be frightened of, is that when we left in Brexit, when we left Europe, they were decidedly hostile to us and gave us all the impression that, you know, that our relationship with them would be one of punishment.
Yeah.
They would always punish me. So if we're going to try and row back on any parts, little bits and pieces, they're going to exact a price that we won't want to pay.
Of course they will. You know, let's be real. Even in this document, they were saying that, you know, Keir Starmer's Turkey is stuffed. You know, the language is already hostile. They're like, you need us. And like, you know, this kind of, there's no partnership here, and there never has been. You know, so many people in the United Kingdom have like kind of downplayed the hostility of the European Union in any negotiation that we've engaged with them, and yet the EU, in their right, have pushed forward to put forward their own agenda, and yet the UK has always taken a back step. It's about time that we had a Prime Minister at some point who decided maybe it's time that we put the British interests first. And this is, yet again, it just shows that even if we vote for something in this country, there's no guarantee that it'll stick. And this is a real problem of trust in our politics.
What I find very odd, we were talking to Mark Oaten, former chairman of the Liberal Democrats earlier on. Liberal Democrats were always anti-Brexit, always campaigned to get it changed, all the rest of it. Fair due to them. You know, that's their view. Even he was saying, look, we either need to be in the EU or out of the EU, and not this sort of half measure, which this seems to be.
Yeah, this is we've always been known as the awkward partner. Even when we were part of the European Union, we had certain special privileges and certain deals that other countries never had. And, you know, we're either in it or we're out of it. And I've always believed that. And I've always respected Remainers, all people, rejoiners who said, look, I want to rejoin the European Union. If you come out and say that, the British public will probably have a lot more respect for you than you saying one thing and then weaseling out of it in another way and trying to say, oh, it's just a technical skirting, or it's just a little detail here, a little change there. That infuriates people even more because it just shows that you're not being upfront and you're not being honest. And that is Keir Starmer through and through.
Could Keir Starmer bring about another referendum?
No. So this is the thing that a lot of us have been looking at for some time. And that's what Keir Starmer's job in this particular parliament is, to bring the UK into alignment with the EU. So basically, whilst there are a lot of people say they want to rejoin, there's no appetite for another referendum. And that, if Keir Starmer pushes that too soon, there could be a bit of a backlash, and you would see Brexit probably kind of gain support. So what he's going to try and do is make us a member of the EU in everything but name. So if he does win again in the next general election, you might see one then. I don't see one in this parliament, but there is a potential for one in the next parliament.
What I don't understand, and there's been a lot of talk of this survey which says the majority of people now want free movement. with the EU, with this country. Now, I find this quite difficult to get my head around, in that free movement and migration is still a huge issue for this country. So why is this survey, why are people supposedly saying, actually, no, we wouldn't mind a bit of free movement?
I think it's because there's always been this narrative that somehow you can't do something, that somehow you've had this right taken away. You can move to another country in the European Union. You can study in another country. You know, it's this idea that, and this narrative that has been pushed very effectively by more European Union-friendly outlets, that, you know, that somehow that right has been taken away, and it's simply not true. So I think when people are asked, would you like that right back? You know, some people will say, well, yeah, of course I would. Despite the fact that all that's really happened is that you've had to fill out a couple of extra forms, and it's not as simple, so easy path. What I find interesting is on the student one, why the European Union has never pushed for this earlier to get your access to British universities, I've never really understood, because considering the fact that the EU doesn't even have a university in the top 10 in the world, and yet we've got quite a few. You know, there are certain areas where if I was a European Union citizen, I would be very much like, well, I want to get in there and get to Britain. You know, there is an argument there, but there is also another element of this. If we look at youth unemployment across the EU, that is very, very high. You know, I think it's nearly 25%, if I remember off the top of my head. You know, of people under the age of 30, like not in any kind of education or employment. And, you know, if you start throwing in something like a student visa, and that's why it's up to 30 years old, they suddenly start to fiddle the statistics, and you can start to make your country look a lot better than it actually is, and performing better. You know, there's a lot of moving of the numbers on this. Yeah. Creative accounting, I think they call it.
Yeah,
yes.
OK. Peter, good to see you. Thank you.
Christopher's been in touch. He said he's a barrister. When I trained to become a barrister, I was taught the principle of slowly, slowly catchy monkey. Keir Starmer, a former barrister, appears to be using the same principle to get us back into the EU. You have been warned. Well, we're joined now by former political correspondent Peter Spencer. Peter, very good morning to you. Here we go again. Do you think Keir Starmer is trying to reverse Brexit?
He's not trying to reverse Brexit, but he's certainly, the word is, reset relations. And it has a huge urgency because of the fact that there is uncertainty and anxiety over security in subsequent to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and also with the election of Donald Trump, the president-elect of the United States, who has threatened to pull the rug out from under NATO if NATO countries don't spend more on defence. So there is a huge urgency about this. When it comes to the EU's, you use the word, the Telegraph uses the word demands, what they are is negotiating positions. And there's quite a lot happening on this front. That the Chancellor last week met her European counterparts for the first time that a British Chancellor has done so since Brexit. And indeed in the spring, Keir Starmer will be going to the first EU-UK summit since Brexit, and he will indeed be spending time with Ursula von der Leyen and the various other top people in it. Now, when it comes to what it is that's on the table to be discussed, fishing is certainly is one of the issues. There's also safety of animal products, but the big one is the potential freedom of movement in regard to young people who wish to study, British people who wish to study abroad, and European people who wish to study in this country. It's quite interesting. There was a survey actually last week which suggested that a majority of people who voted Leave would be up for a certain degree of freedom of movement. So I think that leaves Starmer with a little bit more freedom of movement than he might have expected. And indeed, interestingly, and as an aside, my latest novel centres on a young woman who's about to go to university and is desperately anxious about the fact that she will not be able to study abroad because of Brexit. And so she, in her feisty little way, decides, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to reverse Brexit.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you say this isn't Keir Starmer trying to reverse Brexit, but I mean, you look at all the details on this, you know, changing some of the fishing rules, UK in UK waters, changing freedom of movement stuff. I mean, it's circumventing Brexit, if not reversing it.
Well, I mean, I think it has to be acknowledged that when Boris Johnson said we have a deal which is oven ready, he manifestly did not. He sold the nation a bit of a pup, and it has left us with a whole range of different problems. One of which, I might add, is that this very week we've had a whole lot of top builders saying, look, it's all very well for the government to say we're going to we're going to make sure that 1.5 million new homes are constructed, and to which the building companies say, oh, who's actually going to do the work then? And one of the problems that they face is the fact that they have labour shortages stemming from, oh, surprise, surprise, Brexit. And so that is another example of where freedom of movement, the lack of freedom of movement, has actually curtailed British opportunity and British prosperity. And that, again, is something which is going to have to be addressed. That's okay for the government to say, right, we're going to have lots of apprenticeships for new builders, new British-born builders. But actually, how long does that take? And how soon does he want to start building the new houses? There's an awful lot of problems here which have to be sorted out as quickly as possible.
Well, we'll leave it there for the moment, but as you say, it's going to be sorted out. It's going to make headlines probably for months, if not years to come. Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Peter.
I have real concerns about this, because whether you supported Brexit or not, it's back to this blooming old argument of whether you supported it or not, there was a democratic decision.
Yeah, it was.
And therefore, shouldn't that be carried through? Well, of course, as Peter quite rightly says, the government says, well, we're not reversing Brexit, we're not going back into the EU, but we are doing actually all these other things, which basically means we may as well be back in.
But what worries me then is we're going to have to pay a price for that, because, I mean, look at the attitude of the rest of the European Union when we did pull out. It was very much as though they wanted to punish us. Yeah. Why would they indulge us by giving us the bits back that we want? You know, like freedom of movement for students or whatever.
But why
they will want us to pay a price.
Why do we even want freedom of movement for students?
Some students do.
Some students do, but it's got to be the minority. It's got to be a minority. So we've got plenty of students who go in and out of the United States. There's not freedom of movement there, so there's got to be ways around it for the very few who want to do it. I don't know. I just think it's extraordinary, all this sort of thing. And
I'm just worried they'll pull back the bits they sound what they want, what Labour has always wanted, I guess, and we'll have to pay quite a steep price for it in certain ways. Don't quite know how, but deals will be done that we may not be entirely happy about.
I just think, what damage does it do to the democratic process in this country if something happens and a few years later it's just all...
Yeah, it was a referendum.
All but reversed in everything but name. Then what's the point? How do we have any faith in anything that we vote for anymore?